You for telling us that.
Yes.
Stupid television says the same thing.
So-
I'm on, no kidding.
Right. So today, Adult Sunday School, Game of Thrones, we are in Zechariah 9. We didn't have it last week. Father's Day happened and Megan came in, so I canceled it. So we had a nice lunch and a nice visit afterwards. So, so yeah, we're continuing on. We're in Zechariah 9. Let me pull this up here.
Change that picture, please.
Well, you won't see it here in a moment.
Oh, excellent.
There we go. Okay. So Zechariah 9, yeah, we're starting in verse 1. If someone will read verse 1 through 3.
The burden of the word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach, with Damascus as its resting place. For the eyes of men, especially of all the tribes of Israel, are toward the Lord. And Hamath also, which borders on it, Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise. For Tyre built herself a fortress and piled up silver like dust, and the gold like the mire of the streets.
Okay. So this prophecy comes to Zechariah, and basically it's a prophecy against the land of Hadrach. We'll cover the rest on Damascus. Now, where is Damascus? That city has not changed a whole lot
Syria, no,
in
it's-
2,000 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Over
It's
that, yeah.
in Syria. So,
Road
so
to
it's the land just north of
North,
Israel.
uh-huh.
So,
Northeast.
and then on Hamath, which borders on it, well, Hamath is to the northwest of that. So it's along the seashore of Syria there.
Are they
what lies
related to
there?
Hamas?
Huh?
Are they related to Hamas?
You know, I didn't do any verbal
I was
or literary
semi-serious.
comparisons, but yeah.
I just wonder. Okay, I'm
Maybe.
sorry I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. So it lies along the side, along the seashore. And if you look at that, now we're talking parts of Jordan, at least southern Jordan. So, and the reason for it, we start to see in verse 3, build herself a stronghold. She's heaped up silver like dust and gold like the dirt of the streets. Basically, they have controlled that part of it so much that this is what they think of silver and gold in their mind. They're so rich that silver and gold are like dust or like dirt to them. So, okay, 4 through 6.
But now the Lord will strip away Tyre's possessions and hurl its fortifications into the sea, and it will be burned to the ground. The city of Ashkelon will see Tyre fall and will be filled with fear. Gaza will shake with terror, as will Ekron, for their hopes will be dashed. Gaza's king will be killed, and Ashkelon will be deserted. Foreigners will occupy the city of Ashdod. I will destroy the pride of the Philistines.
Okay, so continuing on with the Tyre and Sidon, the Lord will take away her possessions, destroy her power on the sea, shall be consumed by fire. Then verse 5 and 6, we go into these words, Ashkelon, Gaza. Well, we know where Gaza is. It's along the seashore to the west of Israel there. Ashkelon and Ekron were two major cities in Philistine territory. There's one that's not mentioned here. At least I don't think it's mentioned later on. Yeah, it's not, because it has been destroyed so many times, and that is the city of Gath. Anybody recognize the city of Gath? That's where Goliath came from, being a Philistine. So Ashkelon and Ekron, they are going to be destroyed as well. So now we've taken care of the north. Now we've mentioned the west to the sea of Israel. I wonder what's coming next.
Were the Philistines in what is now Jordan or Syria?
They would have been to the west, so they would be, right now, they are part of the Israel west.
Okay.
Yeah, the Philistines are part of that Gaza area, right along the Mediterranean. Okay. 7 and 8.
I will take the blood from their mouths and the forbidden food from between their teeth. Those who are left will belong to our God and become a clan in Judah, and Ekron will be like the Jebusites. But I will encamp at my temple to guard it against marauding forces. Never again will an oppressor overrun my people, for now I am keeping watch.
Okay, and so 7, we see what the reason why the Philistine area is going to be completely destroyed. And that's because they are eating forbidden food. They're take the blood from their mouths. It's because they are bloodthirsty. They're a bloodthirsty group. They're built on war. If you look at, I'm gonna pick on Lanny a little bit because he picks on me about this. If you look at Star Trek, the Philistines are like the Klingons. No, you're talking Vulcan now. Their Philistines are like the Klingons. They're always looking for a fight. They're always looking for blood. And it's because it's built into their honor system.
Hmm.
Ruben, what's changed?
Well, not much.
Not much is right.
Part of it, if you look at the history of things, part of it is survival as a way to self-preservation. They've had to become warlike, but after they have preserved themselves, power corrupts. And so the more powerful you become,
The more
the more
corrupt.
corrupt you
Yeah.
become.
Yeah. Can I just read my version of verse 7? Because
Sure.
I think it's a different spin. I just
All
want to see
right.
what you think. It says, they will no longer eat meat with the blood still in it
Mhm.
or any other forbidden food.
That is a direct
I mean, to me,
correlation.
I've heard that different there.
It's a direct, right, it's a direct correlation to the Jews,
Right,
because they were told to not eat the blood product.
Right, yeah.
Blood means life.
I understand it. It just, I didn't catch that when I read it in this version, but here I did.
Yep,
So,
depends on who translates it.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah, mine's a little different too.
Cool.
I'll grab the bloody meat from their mouths and snatch the detestable sacrifices from their teeth.
Well,
Ah,
yeah,
that's
that's
interesting,
part of
yeah.
it is this, right. Their sacrifices were part of those human sacrifices too, but
Yeah.
to their God, there was not a portion laid aside. So when they sacrificed, they ate the whole portion. That's why Jews were set apart. That's why God's made a set of rules to make them completely different from everyone else. But Israel didn't like that. They wanted to be like everybody else, and that led to their issues. So,
Well, is this all meat,
it's
fowl and fish?
just the blood. The blood had to be drained.
Okay, they could eat it if the blood had been
In other
drained.
words, no steak that far.
But they weren't going to do that.
No. Okay, I see, because I was wondering. how
It's like my
they got-
cardiologist telling me don't eat red meat. Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
No, then, then how do they get protein if they didn't eat any meat? That's what.
Well-
I was wondering.
You got to remember that a lot of these are fish-based diets.
Yeah,
Or, and then agricultural as you went inland.
Uh-huh.
So sheep, goats,
yeah.
cattle in some places.
Yeah.
Some states. I'm sure horses and donkey meat was probably a commodity too.
I can
Probably.
move, Paul.
I don't think camels, but maybe camels were involved. Who knows?
Who knows what? Okay. Anyway.
Okay, and in verse 8, this is interesting. But who's I? God will encamp at my temple. And it gives a second reason why God would be in the temple, not only for them to worship, but to protect his people. Okay, in verse 9, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion, shout, daughter Jerusalem, see your king comes to you, righteous and victorious. Oh, listen here, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So what is this prophecy about?
I have no idea.
This is a messianic
Yeah,
prophecy.
it is.
Definitely.
Definitely.
And we get this same exact verbiage. I mean, it's taken right from this in the Gospels, Jesus riding into Jerusalem.
On a donkey, yeah.
Verse 10 and 11.
We get some.
Oh, is it me?
I know, I
Okay.
jumped,
I can do it. I've got it. I'll
Okay.
put my version. Verse 10.
I will take the war chariots away from the Ephraim and the horse soldiers from Jerusalem. I will destroy the bows used in war. Your king will bring news of peace to the nations. He will rule from sea to sea, from the Euphrates River to the ends of the earth. And,
Definitely.
And 11.
Jerusalem, this is verse 11. Jerusalem, we use blood to seal your agreement. So I am setting your people free from that empty hole in the ground.
Hmm.
Prisoners go
What?
home.
Mhm.
Now you have something to hope for. I am telling you now, I'm coming back to you.
You're reading too far.
Yeah, we went too far.
Pen and ink changes.
I just got to roll. I'm sorry.
So I know. So God is going to take away the chariots from the war horses of Jerusalem and the battle bow broken. Why? We just found out in verse 8.
He's gonna be on.
Because God's going to be in the temple protecting them. They don't need these instruments of war.
Oh, okay.
Proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea. So, and in verse 11, because of the blood of my covenant with you. The covenant, it's never ended with Israel. The covenant
Yeah.
still remains.
What's the blood got to do with it?
Well, when you're making when the Abrahamic covenant was taking
Mhm.
place, I'm sorry, was it Abraham? Yeah, it was Abraham. Abraham was told to fillet fowl breasts and meat, and basically you cut them in half, you lay them on each side. Abraham walks through the middle of them, and then he's put into a deep sleep. Because what comes after is God walks between them. So the blood of these animals during that covenant making is what is being
Okay.
referred to here, referred specifically to the Abraham. But yeah, Abraham never got to see God, but it says that God passed between the two halves and the covenant was sealed. Okay. I will free you prisoners from the waterless pit. Well, when it don't make sense, you read further.
Well, read it over.
It don't make sense.
It don't make sense.
12 and 13.
Return to the stronghold, O prisoners who have the hope. This very day I am declaring that I will restore double to you. For I will bend Judah as my bow. I will fill the bow with Ephraim, and I will stir up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece. And I will make you like a warrior's sword.
Okay. So now we're starting to get into, yeah, go ahead, historical things.
Oh, Greece here. Is Greece now beginning its rise to power?
This is a prophecy, but yes, you've got the Medes and Persians, but you've got dissension in the ranks. So yes, Macedonia, Alexander will come from it. Yeah.
So this is prior to Alexander.
Prior to, yeah. At this point, yes, but it's a prophecy leading to
Yeah.
that.
My footnote says these verses predict the defeat of Greece,
Mhm.
particularly of Antiochus Epiphanes
And-
by the Jewish people during the Maccabean era, second
Yes.
century.
And yeah, that 400 years between the end of Malachi and beginning of Matthew has to do with what this is prophesying to. That one page, 400 years.
Greece came and went, and then it's the Romans.
Greece came and went, yeah.
14 and 15.
The Lord will appear above his people, and his arrows will fly like lightning. The sovereign Lord will hear the ram's horn and attack like a whirlwind from the southern desert. The Lord of heaven's army will protect his people, and they will defeat their enemies by hurling great stones. They will shout in battle as though drunk with wine. They will be filled with blood like a bowl, drenched with blood like the corners of the altar.
Okay. This is some very vivid imagery.
Very good.
And you don't see imagery like this again until we get to John's Revelation. And there are some neat interpositions. Revelation, most people assume, well, rightly so, that Revelation refers to the Gentiles, non-church. The church is not there. It's the Gentile thing. But remember, we just heard about the covenant. Israel is still in covenant with God, and so God protects Israel. In Revelation and even in Matthew, it talks about this judgment of sheep and goats.
Mhm.
The judgment of sheep and goats is specifically directed at Israel. So while everyone else goes through judgment, all the Gentiles go through judgment, Israel is going to be judged based on the covenant. And that's the sheep and the goats, because there will be those that are found worthy in the covenant and those that are not. Some people think that's a double standard,
Yeah,
but it is and it isn't, because we are grafted onto the covenant later on. We're judged by the same standards. Israel's judged harder.
Mm.
I believe this refers to later on during the tribulation period, however it plays out.
Mhm.
You're going to have all these nations march against Israel, because Israel, not being the church, still remains, but God protects them. They're going to march against Israel, and as we've already seen, they're going to march against God. Well, God ain't going to let that happen, and so Israel is going to miraculously, very much like the 7-Day War, they're going to miraculously survive this.
They've miraculously survived so far.
And so I believe this is a reference to that time during the tribulation period when the nations march against Israel, when Israel again is blamed for everything. And this time they're going to come out on the other side of it completely unscathed. Everyone else is going to suffer the consequences because they're not marching against Israel, they're marching against God.
That's been going on since 1948. It hadn't changed.
Well, yes, but Israel has allies.
Yeah.
During the tribulation period, they won't.
Oh.
At least it'll start off that they do,
Hmm.
but they won't later on.
Hmm.
And God's going to protect them because of the covenant. So
Well, how do we fit in that if we're not an ally?
well, if we're the church, we're gone.
Oh,
If we believe
okay.
in that
Okay.
that process of,
The rapture.
that series of processes. So
Okay.
okay, so 16 through 17.
The Lord their God will save his people on that day as a shepherd saves his flock. They will sparkle in his land like jewels in a crown. How attractive and beautiful they will be. Grain will make the young men thrive, and new wine the young women.
Ooh.
Ooh,
So the men are going to drink beer
The party, the
and
party.
the women are going to drink wine.
that's where it ought to be. Oh, no.
New
Uh-uh.
wine.
And let me tell you something about new wine. You never want to drink that. I guarantee you that.
Diarrhea.
No,
Yes.
you drink it and it continues to ferment as it goes through your system. So all of a sudden you're fine, bam, whipping.
How do you know that?
Well,
Because it tastes good.
I lived in Germany.
Yes, for a long time.
keep in mind why wine was used as a drink. It was because that's the way they could purify their
Yes,
water.
yeah,
Right,
Yeah.
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 So new wine meant that it was most pure. Okay. They didn't drink it necessarily
That's a
for the
good thing.
effect. Well, not the buzz effect. They
Yeah.
drank it for the effect of purity.
The new-
Drinking
you
clean
drink
water.
new wine in Germany and then you have onion cake with it. You know?
Onion.
So-
Okay, they're
so-
not bad.
This is the result of these nations marching against. As a
It's gotta be
shepherd,
better than glory.
as a shepherd saves his flock. You know,
Yeah.
how often do we hear these phrases? And not only that, they're going to be like jewels in a crown. Yeah, so.
Just out of curiosity, after reading this, and in your studies, are there any modern prophecies that go along with what we're having happen now in the Middle East?
Well, it depends on who you follow and how much you believe it. I mean, you could look at Nostradamus
Mhm.
and see how some of his have come true. But it's not a matter of truth, it's a matter of how you apply it to your context. So there's a lot of things that can happen that we can say, oh, it came true. But yet later on, 2-3 generations further on, they say, oh, well, no, it couldn't happen then because it's happening now. So there are multiple ways it can come true at multiple times.
The reason I ask, I'm thinking of the Abraham covenants that developed with some of these Middle Eastern countries have come together now to bypass the Palestine Liberation Front. And from reading this, they're going to all have been destroyed in one way or another.
Correct. Well, look, there, another example similar to that would be the European Union. Their evangelicals went nuts when that took place.
Yeah.
When they went to a universal standard, the
Mhm.
euro, you got the Universal Union, and guess how many started? 10.
Mhm.
Well, if you remember back to our prophecies about the 10 kings, there is a way you can apply that to that situation. Now that you're having a breakdown in the
Mhm.
European Union with Greece and England, you know, Brexit,
Yeah,
and all that, you're going, oh, well, maybe that was just kind of a partially realized prophecy come true. That it's not yet. And of course, God hasn't come back, Jesus hasn't come back yet. So
yeah.
we take to heart that there's more, there's got to be more to it
Mhm.
that we're just not seeing or not understanding.
Or it hadn't happened yet. Yeah,
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at that European Union started with the common market. That was an interesting situation when Charles de Gaulle said France wasn't going to join. That literally ended the common market, and the next step was the European Union. And now countries are fighting that. You mentioned Greece, the people are getting tired of supporting Greece.
Yeah.
So are we ready?
Yeah. On
Ask
to
the Lord
Zechariah
for-
10. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Ask the Lord for rain in the springtime.
10.
It is the Lord who sends the thunderstorms. He gives showers of rain to all people and plants of the field to everyone. The idols speak deceitfully. Diviners see visions that lie. They tell dreams that are false. They give comfort in vain. Therefore, the people wander like sheep, oppressed for lack of a shepherd.
Okay, so we've shifted gears now. Now it's more of a song or a prayer or something like that. And of course, I planned this, Lanny, that verse 1 would come up today. Thunderstorms outside.
It's
So,
not springtime.
well, it's close enough. Yeah, so we missed it by a couple of weeks.
Just a week.
Right. Basically, this is a statement that of what every prophet says. There will be false prophets. Don't listen to them. You know, they're going to tell you lies. You're gonna have people that act like they're your friends and they're not. And then people are going to wander like a sheep, oppressed for the lack of a shepherd. They're going to, you know, because of all this, some are going to be led astray, and then they don't know where to turn because they feel as if they can't go back to their own because they forsook them, but they can't go to anybody else because they can't trust them.
So you don't have to be a prophet though to ask for rain in springtime. I can do that.
Yep.
I was thinking we could use some a while ago.
We got some there.
Okay. Now
Did
here,
it all week.
Cut it out, cut it out.
as we get into 3 and 4, a lot of this applies to the leaders. So go ahead.
Who's next? Me?
You.
Okay, verse 3. The Lord says, I am very angry with the shepherds. I made them responsible for what happens to my sheep. In parentheses, people of Judah are his flock, and the Lord all-powerful really does take care of his flock. He cares for them as a soldier cares for his beautiful war horse. The cornerstone, the tent peg, the war bow, and the advancing soldiers will all come from Judea together.
Okay.
My 3 is a little bit different.
It's okay,
Maybe
go
it's
ahead.
not, but my anger is kindled against the shepherds, and I will punish the male goats.
There's that phrase,
Oh,
goats.
Yes. For the Lord of hosts has visited his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic horse in battle.
Yeah. That prophecy of the sheep and the goats.
Mm.
It's directly, specifically at Israel. The sheep are those who have followed God faithfully. The goats are those who
Have
did
not.
not. So your translation saying goats, you'll punish the goats.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's not mine.
We see where where that could play out.
A lot of the Jews, though, did follow. Did they not?
Well, look at it this way. All Jews will say there's a God, El,
Mhm,
there's a God. But what we're talking about here is this Messiah.
Uh-huh.
They don't believe a Messiah has come.
No.
And they
that's
will
true.
eventually come to the realization that Messiah has come. Some of them will accept that, some will not. That's where the connection between the Gentiles
Yeah.
who believe in Messiah and those who don't.
Uh-huh.
So when I said earlier that that it seems like it's a double standard, but it really isn't. It's because they're just being judged separately,
Mm.
but they're being judged by the same standards.
Hmm.
Who followed Messiah, who did not.
Mhm.
And then, verse 4, from Judah will come the cornerstone. Oh, who's the cornerstone?
Jesus.
Jesus is the cornerstone. Except for sinners to atone. Okay. From him, the tent peg. What does a tent peg do?
Holds a tent to the ground.
Right, it's kind of like a foundation
Yeah, it is.
piece. From him, the battle bow.
Couldn't Peter also be called the cornerstone? Just because Petros
He
rock?
could, but yeah, we're talking Jesus here.
Okay,
Remember, Zechariah, at this point, this isn't a prophecy, but we just finished with the prophecy. That was a messianic prophecy. So we can infer based on the antecedent that we're talking about Jesus.
okay.
Well,
And then from him, every room.
did the prophets have any inkling? I mean, had God given them any inkling that what they were saying, what Zechariah was saying just then was a messianic prophecy? Did he have any clue?
Yes and no. Yeah, the simple answer is yes. They had a clue, but they couldn't figure out how it pieced together.
Okay.
And so being a messenger of God, that aspect of it, they told everything they see.
Mhm.
And it's up to the listener or the reader to try to fill in the gaps and figure out where it takes place. Because they're in the same boat. They can't
Yeah.
differentiate what they're saying.
Uh-huh.
They're just relaying the word of God.
Yeah.
Verse 5, I'll read this. Together they will be like warriors in battle, trampling their enemy into the mud of the street. Ooh, that's bad. They will fight because the Lord is with them, and they will put the enemy horsemen to shame. Now, this is kind of a shift from what we saw earlier. If God is protecting them, then, but remember, that was part of the prophecy. This is not. God, the prophecy was talking from a God vantage point. This is talking from a human vantage point. So it's bringing hope. Okay, 6. Anybody want to read that?
And I shall strengthen the house of Judah, and I shall save the house of Joseph, and I shall bring them back, because I have had compassion on them, and they will be as though I had not, rejected them. For I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them.
Okay, now we've shifted back to that prophecy. We had that little interlude, and now we're back to the prophecy. Why do they do that?
To make us crazy.
Stephen King wrote something like that, we'd kill him. Well, he does write like that.
I know if you're teaching English and read, and somebody wrote that, you'd be all over.
Right, and the prophecy ain't over. You notice the quotation marks are not there at the end.
Yeah.
So, right, so God is speaking again now. I will strengthen Judah. I will save them. I will restore them. I had not, they will be as though I had not rejected them. I am the Lord their God. I will answer them. So, okay, 7 and 8.
The people of Israel will become like mighty warriors, and their hearts will be made happy as if by wine. Their children too will see it and be glad. Their hearts will rejoice in the Lord. When I whistle to them, they will come running, for I have redeemed them. From the few who are left, they will grow as numerous as they were before.
Okay, now it says that they will become like warriors. It doesn't mean that they're going to go to war, but you got to look at the attitude of a warrior. What is it about soldiers that makes them stand out?
Strength and power.
Strength, a camaraderie, a unity,
Yeah.
a unity of will. They have the same goal. They march to the same drum.
Yeah.
So read your verse again there, number 7.
Yeah,
The people of Israel will become like mighty warriors.
Yeah.
Well,
and
that's
their
different.
hearts
That's
will be
different, yeah.
Ephraimites.
Well, the Ephraimites, Ephraim was a son of Joseph and ended up being the largest tribe. So when we see Ephraim, they kind of make up the majority of the Jews.
Okay,
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It says will be like mighty men.
Mhm.
I know that's a phrase that's used quite often in the Old Testament, but who were they?
The mighty men?
Was that Goliath? People the size of Goliath?
No, well, I don't think it refers to that. I think if it were going to refer to something like that, it would be refer to David's mighty men. David had 30. He had 30 special soldiers, kind of like his special forces.
How much guards?
Well, no, they were more. They were like mercenaries. They were more like mercenaries. Yeah. And Jonathan was one of them prior to his death. But they, in fact, I think if you look through some translation, you'll actually see they're called David's mighty men. But they were, again, they were like a special forces unit. They had one goal. They were of one mind. Everything worked according to a plan. That plan did not deviate. That kind of thing.
Navy SEAL.
I mean, if you want to look at it as Goliath, I don't know. I mean, there's always a possibility it could refer to something like that. But if I were to make a connection, I would probably go with David's mighty men and not so much Goliath.
I like my version of verse 7. The people of Ephraim will be as happy as soldiers who have had too much to drink. No, there's 2 army guys I know of.
Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute, and what does it say? And what?
The people will be as happy as soldiers who have had too much to drink.
Yep. I've seen that.
Sounds more like Navy people up here on the other.
What can you say?
But you can't just single it out. Their children
No.
will see it and they'll be happy too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Have a happy time.
But I will signal, I will gather them in, I will redeem them. They will be numerous as before. What's the message of hope? 9 and 10. We got a long way to go, guys.
Sorry. It's your turn.
Okay. Though I scatter them among the peoples yet in distant lands, they will remember me. They and their children will survive, and they will return. I will bring them back from Egypt and gather them from Syria. I will bring them to Gilead and Lebanon, and there will not be room enough for them.
Is that happening?
Oh, yeah.
You could say yes and no. They're fighting over land.
Oh, they're always doing that.
I'm thinking the millions who tried to get, who were getting out, who got out and went to Europe.
Some would say that it happened in 1948. I would say that was just partially realized, that it hasn't come to completion yet.
No, probably, yeah.
11 and 12.
They will pass through the sea of trouble. The surging sea will be subdued, and all the depths of the Nile will dry up. Assyria's pride will be brought down, and Egypt's scepter will pass away. I will strengthen them in the Lord, and in his name they will live securely, declares the Lord.
Has any of that happened? Has the Nile dried up?
Not yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
He
with like
sure lost a
Nasser.
lot of its power.
You could say Assyria's pride has been brought down, but there are other nations that are in the area that are pretty
Correct.
powerful. Egypt is still there and they're
That's
pretty
right.
strong.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think that's happened yet. On to 11.
My
1
turn.
through 3.
1 through 3. Lebanon, open your gates so that the fire will come and burn your cedar trees. The cypress trees will cry because the cedar trees have fallen. Those powerful trees will be taken away. Oak trees and Bashan will cry for the forest that was cut down. Listen to the crying shepherds. Their powerful leaders were taken away. Listen to the roaring of the young lions. Their thick bushes near the Jordan River have all been taken away.
Wow, what a change.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, that fits the description of the countryside today, doesn't it?
Well,
Quite a bit of desert.
does it
there.
make sense though to happen, for this to say the way it does? Right after we just finished verse in chapter 10. So we read on.
It's
Yeah,
in
we-
chapters.
Doesn't make sense, keep going.
Verse
That's-
4 through 6.
Thus says the Lord, my God, pasture the flock doomed to slaughter. Those who buy them, slay them, and go unpunished, and each of those who sell them says, blessed be the Lord, for I have become rich, and their own shepherds have no pity on them. For I shall no longer have pity on the inhabitants of the land, declares the Lord. But behold, I shall cause the men to fall, each into another's power, and into the power of his king. And they will strike the land, and I shall not deliver them from their power.
I think based on what we read in the first 3 verses, marked with this, that we are talking about false shepherds, pastors or leaders, church leaders who lead their flocks astray. And I will say at the right there in the middle of verse 5, those who sell them say, praise the Lord, I am rich. Their own shepherds do not spare them. That to me, this sounds a little bit like an Old Testament version of the prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
Give me all your money and you'll be
And
blessed.
you'll be blessed, yeah,
I'll be rich, but you'll be blessed.
you'll be blessed.
And I'll be blessed by your riches.
Yeah,
Reverend
Reverend Ike,
from the 70s, 60s.
I will say that scripture is not always comfortable.
no, it
Yeah.
isn't, yeah, no, it isn't.
7 through 9.
So I cared for the flock intended for slaughter, the flock that was oppressed. Then I took 2 shepherds' staffs and named one Favor and the other Union. I got rid of their 3 evil shepherds in a single month. But I became impatient with these sheep, and they hated me too. So I told them, I won't be your shepherd any longer. If you die, you die. If you are killed, you are killed. And let those who remain devour each other.
So based on this, now we understand that the message was given to Zechariah specifically. And Zechariah was called to shepherd the flock. But there were some parts that didn't want to follow him.
Yeah,
And so that's what verse 9 means. Well, okay, that's fine. We're into verse 8. They hated me and I grew weary of them. I will not be your shepherd. Let the dying die, the perish and perish. Let those who are left eat one another's flesh. So God told me to come lead you. You didn't want to follow me. So you're on your own.
yep,
So who is the I, first person here?
This is Zechariah.
Zechariah.
Okay, gotcha.
It's still going on today.
Of course, Paul.
Because the countries don't, they're going back to the old tribal side of things. But one tribe doesn't like another, and here you got the different countries.
Boy,
in the
that's
Middle East not
Afghanistan
liking each
to a
other.
T.
And it takes a whole new connotation now, 10 through 13.
Then I took my staff called Favor and broke it, revoking the covenant I had made with all the nations. It was revoked on that day, so the rest of the flock who were watching me knew it was the word of the Lord. I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter at the house of the Lord.
What does this sound like?
I'll be darned, Judas.
So if this is Zechariah, why are we seeing references of this in Zechariah to Judas?
It's another messianic.
Well,
Partly, I'm going to tell you that, I was going to tell you. If you apply this to Judas, this paints Judas possibly in a whole different light, that what he thought he was doing was for the good.
Well, he did, didn't he?
He did, didn't he?
Well, depends on what translation you read. Because in some places it says that the devil entered him.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true.
Hmm.
So it's very difficult to differentiate. Personally, what I believe is that the gospel writer took this reference of 30 pieces of silver from Zechariah and applied it there because it led to the destruction of the Messiah.
Mhm.
This leads to the destruction of the ones that we're supposed to save. So there is a
That's reasonable.
comparison there. I think they're two separate instances,
Mhm.
and they have no bearing on each other, other than one person tried, the gospel writer tried to infer. Is the gospel writer wrong? No.
Well, after reading this, I would say Judas had no choice. Yeah, as I've always had preached to me that Judas was, going to be the one who was going to be the treasurer, and he would give money to the poor, and therefore here's a chance for 36 pieces of silver to give to the poor.
Well, one gospel writer wrote him off being treasurer as being a kind of a sneaky treasurer.
Yeah.
So I would just challenge you to think about what it would have been like to be at that table at the Last Supper when Jesus says, one of you will betray me. It is the one that I dip my hand into the bread with, and or dip my bread into the wine with. And that very next person is Judas. Imagine sitting at that table and Judas being, and watching Judas's reaction as it's happening.
Look at the painting of the Last Supper. Everybody's looking at Jesus except in one person.
Well,
And he's turned away.
look at our coinage, even in the United States. Everybody's face faces one direction except for Abraham Lincoln's.
Mhm.
Faces the opposite.
I never
And-
took-
I
And
never
they
thought
say
that.
it's because he divided the nations or whatever, or divided the nation. So it's weird. I don't think that's true, but I think it's just, that's how they could fit his face on there right
Yeah.
now.
Not to drag this out any longer, my version of 13, which I see a little bit differently, is then the Lord told me, so that's how much they think I am worth. Throw that large amount of money into the temple treasury. It says, when I think of Potter, I think that's a nobody. This is the temple treasury.
Well, I will say when he refers to the potter, that gospel writer again, there's two different deaths for Judas. One of them is that he hung himself.
Yeah.
The other is that he was somehow cut open and eviscerated,
I hadn't heard
but he
that
was
one.
buried in a potter's field with the money,
Okay.
the money that
With
was
the
paid
money.
by the
And then
potter.
conflicts, right?
Yeah, so, okay.
Temple treasury, okay. Where are we now?
Oh. Trying to go to the next one. 14 and through 16.
So is that me?
Yes.
Then I broke my second staff called union, breaking the family bond between Judah and Israel. Then the Lord said to me, take again equipment of a foolish shepherd. For I'm going to raise up a shepherd over the land who will not care for the lost, or seek the young, or heal the injured, or feed the healthy, but will eat the meat of the choice sheep, tearing off their hooves.
Now, based on what we just read, does this mean anything to Judas?
I was thinking of Herod.
You're correct. It is. So if this is what applies to Herod, then the other thing must apply to that same time too. You're going to have a leader that's going to just say, okay, I'm leading you, but and it's not necessarily Herod, but during that time frame, okay? But you're going to have one that's going to raise up a shepherd over land who's not going to care for the lost or seek the young or heal the injured. They're going to eat the meat of choice sheep. So they are not going to care about their own people. Well, this can apply to the Herods.
Mhm.
At one point, I believe, I don't know where I read it, that Herod thought of himself as the Messiah too.
Well, at that point, they all kind of did.
They all did.
They all did.
Yeah.
17. Woe to the worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May the sword strike his arm and his right eye. May his arm be completely withered, his right eye totally blinded. Why do you think? I mean, you know, strike his arm, it doesn't say which arm, but why his right eye?
Is it? No, it's not the dominant eye, is it?
Well, kind of.
Could be.
Kind of.
Yeah.
In the Latin, we can understand a little bit better in the Latin. The word right in Latin is dextro,
Mhm.
which has this connotation of being true,
Mhm.
veracity, you know, the truth, seeing the truth, being righteous. It has that connotation. The left eye, y'all ready? Sinestro, the same word we get sinister from. You ever heard the term evil eye?
Mhm.
The left eye is the evil eye. So with the right eye blinded, all this person sees is evil.
Is evil. That makes sense.
Zechariah 12,
Okay, how far?
1 through 3.
This is a message from the Lord about Israel.
Okay, it's a prophecy. Tells us that right off the bat.
Okay, entitled Visions About the Nations Around You. Okay, the Lord is the one who made the earth and the sky, and he put the human spirit in people. And this is what the Lord said, look, I will make Jerusalem like a cup of poison to the nations around her. The nations will come and attack that city, and all of Judah will be caught in the trap. But I will make Jerusalem like a heavy rock. Those who try to take it will hurt themselves. They will be cut and scratched. All the nations on earth will come together to fight against Jerusalem.
Jerusalem keeps winning.
That ring a bell, what I was talking about earlier? This is a prophecy about the same thing.
About what?
Okay.
Yeah, about
The same event.
this, right, the same event that I mentioned earlier. So we're hearing it a little bit differently, but it's the same event. 4 through 6.
In that day, declares the Lord, I will strike every horse with bewilderment and his rider with madness. But I will watch over the house of Judah while I strike every horse of the peoples with blindness. And then the clans of Judah will say in their hearts, a strong support for us are the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to the Lord of hosts, their God. In that day, I will make the clans of Judah like a fire pot among the pieces of wood and a flaming torch among sheaves. So they will consume on the right hand and on the left all the surrounding peoples, while the inhabitants of Jerusalem will dwell on their own sites in Jerusalem.
Okay, in this, this has a differentiation between Judah and Jerusalem. In other conversations that we've had, they've kind of been one and the same, but there's a reason they're being differentiated. Jerusalem representing God,
Mhm.
God's presence in Jerusalem. Judah would be everyone who worships God, everyone around that.
Around.
So that's the difference between them.
Hmm.
7 through 9.
The Lord will give victory to the rest of Judah first before Jerusalem, so that the people of Jerusalem and the royal line of David will not have greater honor than the rest of Judah. On that day, the Lord will defend the people of Jerusalem. The weakest among them will be as mighty as King David, and the royal descendants will be like God, like the angel of the Lord who goes before them. For on that day, I will begin to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem.
Okay.
Hmm.
So the Lord will save the dwellings of Judah first, so that the honor of the house of David and Jerusalem house may not be greater than that of Judah. If we think to a time, if you follow the idea of a millennium, this 1,000-year reign,
Mhm.
there are people who survived the tribulation period, people who believed and they survived the tribulation period. And however long it is, whether it's 1,000 years, whether it's something different, but a long time, they will have family. They're still human. They will have families that will grow up. They will have to be taught to love God, and they'll be taught the same lesson. There will be others. There will be a time when they don't follow that too, because they're still given this mind of free will, this idea of free will. At the same time, those who have died before all this happened are going to be present with Jesus living among them. And what this is hearkening to is that those that have survived the tribulation and still live are not going to be they're not going to be thought of any less than those who were martyred or had gone on before. They're all going to be ranked the same. It's just an idea.
Mhm.
A lot of this is my own personal thought. Everybody there, how many people are here?
8.
Counting Karen, there's 9, yeah, so there's 9 different theologies on this. Okay, 10 through 12.
And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one that they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for a firstborn son. On that day, the weeping in Jerusalem will be as great as the weeping of Hadad Rimmon on the plain of Megiddo. The land will mourn, each clan by itself, with their wives by themselves. The clan of the house of David and their wives, the clan of the house of Nathan and their wives.
Yeah, and it continues on before. So they're going to be poured out the spirit of grace and supplication. Now, this refers to another specific event. In verse 11, the plain of Megiddo, the word for plain in Aramaic is Ar. So Megiddo, Armageddon.
Oh, I'm getting.
Okay. Chapter 12, verse 13 and 14.
Clan of the house of Levi and their wives, the clan of Shimei and their wives, and all the rest of the clans and their wives.
Now that continues on from the previous verse, okay? I was trying to save space on the slide. So on to verse,
Get everybody.
yeah, that's everybody. So on to verse 13.
On that day, a fountain will be opened to the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and impurity.
There is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins. Verse 2 through 3.
13.
Yeah, we're in chapter 13 now.
Okay, verse 2.
2 through 3.
The Lord all-powerful says, at that time I will remove all the idols from the earth. People will not even remember their names, and I will remove the false prophets and the unclean spirits from the earth. Whoever continues to prophecy will be punished. Even their parents, their own mother and father, will say to them, you have spoken lies in the name of the Lord, so you must die. Their own mother and father will stab them for prophesying.
Yeah.
Basically, just God's going to wipe out any threat of sin and unrighteousness.
Or just Facebook.
5 and 6. Yeah.
I was getting to like that last verse there. Anybody prophesies the parents will kill them.
Right.
Really rough.
I told you, it's never comfortable. They're not always comfortable. So 5 and 6.
Did you just read?
Yes, he did.
Okay. But he will say, I am not a prophet. I am a tiller of the ground, for a man sold me as a slave in my youth. And one will say to him, what are these wounds between your arms? And he will say, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends.
Okay. So going back to the previous verse, it's talking about the parents are going to stab them for prophesying. Well, no, you don't do that. I'm not a prophet. I'm a farmer. Ray Stevens has a song called the Barber Song, where he goes in, he goes to get his hair cut at different places. He's he's just him. He goes in, and the first place he goes is Coos Bay, Oregon. He walks into this barber shop, and he can tell that it's run by a really hefty logger kind of fella. And so the guy asked him, what do you do? He doesn't, he feels like he's got to be tough with this guy. Well, I'm a logger. And then the next place he goes, he's going through the South and he runs across this barber shop. And when he walks in, he realizes that he's dealing with a born again barber.
A born
Because-
again?
A born again barber, because the barber shop had a steeple on it. In the corner was a choir.
Oh.
Sat him on the bar, sat him in the barber chair and immediately began to pray over him. As he gets there, barber asked him, what do you do? And he said, he's thinking in his mind, well, I'm a sinner. I've slept with a lot of women, drunk a lot of wine, done all this. And so I looked him right in the eye and I told him, I run this church for loggers.
When I read Zechariah 13, I'll always remember Ray Stevens.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, so we finished there. We ended on a good note. I say a funny note, but so the next time we meet, temple celebration and the introduction to Esther.
All right.
So still in Zechariah.
Yeah, the end of Zechariah 13 and then on to Esther. Now, Esther is a weird book because Esther does not mention the name of God at all. But yet it's included in the Hebrew writings. They don't know whether it's actually historical. There's no proof that any of it actually happened, but we get an interesting take. If it's a legend, it's a lot like some of Daniel's legend. There's parts of Daniel that are not included in our Bible that talk about Bel and the dragon. It talks about him meeting the prophets there in Babylon, the prophets of Babylon, and arguing with them, and the god of Dagon being dropped face down on the ground, and then others he proves to them that Dagon ain't really eating the sacrificial meat. It's the priests that are doing it in a hidden room. So they think maybe Esther is a legend, but I tell you that in women's theology, it is a very strong case for the power of women and the place of women in Scripture. So I include it because it is a part of the Bible as I know it. And
So I wonder how it passed the canon.
well, the biggest part of canon is that it provided a part for our faith.
Okay,
Those books that were not included, they added nothing to our faith.
okay.
And in the case of the Maccabees, it was just all historical. It didn't
Right,
change
right,
anything.
right, right.
But yeah, it's about faith, even though God's never mentioned it's about faith.
It's interesting though that we included Esther and did not include Maccabees,
Right. Well, the Catholics did. So maybe they got it right.
So maybe I won't be here next week. I'll be with Catholic.
Yeah, next week's 4th of July, so dress accordingly. We heard that passage today. Present yourselves the way you should for 4th of July.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
appreciate it.
There's a thing called Curiosity Stream.